Keep that animal out of here, the teacher snapped, thrusting her chin toward the boy slumped in the wheelchair at the back of the room. There's nothing going on upstairs. He's furniture. You let that dog near him, you're cleaning up the mess. Those words landed somewhere between my ribs and stayed there. I stood frozen in the doorway of the 4th grade classroom, gripping the worn leather leash attached to my golden retriever, Chester. Chester, a certified therapy dog whose heart could have filled a room on its own, wagged his tail, completely unaware that the woman in the cardigan had just stripped a 10-year-old of his humanity. "I'm James," I said, keeping my tone level even as my blood was already running hot. "The new one-on-one aide, and this is Chester." Mrs. Thornton, the lead teacher, never lifted her eyes from the stack of papers she was grading. She flicked her hand toward the far corner of the room. "Whatever, just keep the dog contained. State assessments are around the corner, and the actual students need concentration. Ethan's back there. If he gets noisy, roll him into the hallway. If he needs changing, page the janitorial crew, but don't hold your breath for them before noon." I turned to look at Ethan. He was secured in an elaborate molded wheelchair, his head drooping to one side. His limbs were rigid, locked in the stiff spasticity of severe cerebral palsy. His gaze rested on a bare section of drywall. No books on his tray, no screen, no pictures, just him and a stretch of beige paint. "Furniture," I murmured under my breath. I guided Chester toward the corner. The rest of the class, 20 chattering, bright-eyed 10-year-olds, tracked us with curiosity, but they already knew the unspoken rule. The boy in the back doesn't count. He's not one of them. "Hey, Ethan," I said gently, kneeling next to his chair. "I'm James, and this big goofy guy right here is Chester." Ethan didn't turn. His eyes stayed anchored to the wall. A thin line of drool gathered at the edge of his mouth. I dabbed it away with a tissue. From across the room, Mrs. Thornton let out a scoff. "Save your energy. Engine's running, but nobody's behind the wheel. Never has been." Chester bumped my elbow with his nose. A soft whine escaped his throat. I glanced at him. He wasn't watching the loud kids stacking Legos. He wasn't watching the teacher. His entire focus was trained on Ethan. "Go ahead, bud," I whispered, loosening the leash. Chester didn't leap. He didn't bark. He moved with a deliberate, solemn weight. He crossed the distance to the wheelchair and with careful slowness laid his broad golden head across Ethan's wasted legs. A long, deep sigh rolled out of him, his warm fur pressing into the boy's locked hands. Then I saw it. It was barely there. If you weren't searching for it, you'd never catch it. Ethan's pinky finger moved. Then his index finger. His hand, the one Mrs. Thornton had dismissed as a useless claw, started to open. Shaking with tremendous effort, Ethan lowered his fingers until they disappeared into Chester's soft coat. Ethan turned his head. It took him a full 10 seconds of agonizing strain, but he turned. He looked down at the dog. And then he looked at me. His eyes were not vacant. They were screaming. Intelligent, desperate, flooded with a loneliness so deep it nearly shattered me. "He likes him," I said out loud. "Reflexes," Mrs. Thornton called from her desk without turning around. "Just muscle spasms." The rest of the day was an education in exclusion. When the class filed to the library for story time, Mrs. Thornton told me to leave Ethan behind because the wheelchair clogs up the carpet area. I ignored her. I wheeled Ethan straight to the center of the circle, with Chester sprawled across his feet, a warm golden weight holding him to the circle. When a few kids grumbled they couldn't see, I told them to scoot over. "Ethan is listening," I said. "He can't follow the story," a girl with braids said. She wasn't being cruel. She was just echoing what the adults had drilled into her. "Watch," I said. I pulled out my own tablet. Before coming in, I'd loaded a basic communication app, something the school hadn't bothered to provide Ethan in 3 years. The screen displayed 4 large colored squares. "Ethan?" I said, a slight tremor in my voice. "The main character in the book is wearing a red hat. Can you show Chester which color is red?" The room went still. Mrs. Thornton lingered by the door, arms folded, a smirk hovering on her lips, waiting for me to crash. Waiting for the furniture to stay motionless. Ethan's breathing turned heavy. His arm quaked. It wasn't a smooth motion. It was a war against his own nervous system. Chester sensed the struggle. He rose and dragged a sloppy tongue across Ethan's cheek. A wet, warm dose of courage. Ethan's hand shot forward. He didn't just graze the screen, he drove his knuckles into it. A robotic voice rang out. "Red." The girl with braids gasped. "He did it!" "Lucky guess," Mrs. Thornton muttered, though the smirk had cracked. "One more," I said, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Ethan, Chester is golden. Yellow. Show us yellow." Ethan didn't pause. He dragged his hand across the tray and struck the yellow square. Yellow. The library erupted. Kids who had looked right through him for years suddenly crowded the wheelchair. "Ethan, do blue! Ethan, look at this! Ethan, pet the dog!" For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't furniture. He was the center of everything, and Chester was his loyal second. I watched a smile, a real, lopsided, breathtaking smile, split across Ethan's face. He released a raw, guttural noise, joy crammed into a voice that couldn't shape it, fighting its way out anyway. Chester barked back, one happy, affirming bark. The rest of that day was a small revolution. I refused to sit in the back. I positioned Ethan at the front. I had the other students take turns reading to him. I made the custodian look Ethan in the eye when he arrived for the restroom assist. By 3 o'clock, Ethan was wiped out, but he was radiating. When the dismissal bell rang and the classroom emptied, I was packing up the tablet when Mrs. Thornton walked over. She looked worn, her armor trying to stitch itself back together. "Listen, James," she said, her voice lower, less sharp. "You've clearly got a talent for this, and the dog is sweet, but don't set yourself up for heartbreak. Today was a fluke. Parents like Ethan's, they grab onto false hope. It's unkind to make them believe he's capable of more than he is. His cognitive function is at the level of an infant. The kindest thing is to keep him comfortable." I fastened the leash to Chester's collar. I looked at this woman, a veteran teacher who had let her empathy calcify until she could gaze at a child and see an object. "Mrs. Thornton," I said, running my hand along Chester's ears, "you look at Ethan and see a broken body. My dog looks at him and sees a human being." Chester walked past 20 typical kids to lie down with Ethan. Dogs don't carry agendas. They don't worry about budgets or standardized scores. They just know who needs love, and they know who has love to give back. I moved toward the door, then stopped. And he's not an infant. He's 10. He knows you think he's stupid. He knows you think he's furniture. Picture being imprisoned inside a body that refuses to cooperate, surrounded by people who talk about you as if you've already left the room. If you'd seen what I saw today, if you'd seen the person locked inside that chair, this classroom would look completely different. And so would you. I stepped out into the sharp autumn air, leaving her standing in the quiet of her empty room. I walked toward the parking lot, my hands trembling. It wasn't just anger. It was grief. A modified van rolled up to the curb, running on the tight clock of the special transit system. The driver gave me a familiar nod. I pulled open the side door. Inside, buckled into the back seat, sat a boy. He looked almost exactly like Ethan. Same wheelchair, same tilting head, Same eyes that fought to focus but held an entire universe of unvoiced thought. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, my voice cracking. I unclipped Chester. The dog launched himself into the van, wedging into the space beside the boy, licking his face in a frenzy. The boy let out that same raw, unchained sound I'd heard in the library. Joy punching through a body that couldn't contain it. Chester barked back. The same bark, the one that said, "I see you." "Hi, Dylan," I said to my son. "Dad's here." I'm not an educator by training. I was a corporate accountant until 5 years ago. I quit the day I accepted that the school system regarded my son as a number, a liability, a piece of furniture. I became an aide, and I trained Chester for a single purpose: to get inside the system, to be the person for someone else's child that I begged the universe someone would be for mine. Driving home, glancing in the rearview mirror at Chester resting his head on my son's chest, I thought about Ethan. I thought about the thousands of Ethans and Dylans parked in back corners of classrooms across this country, staring at blank walls, waiting for a single person to notice they're alive. We live in a world that worships intellect and physical perfection. But today, a dog taught a room full of humans a lesson no textbook contains. A voice doesn't always require words to be heard, and a soul doesn't need a working body to be whole. If a dog can recognize the person behind the disability, why is it so difficult for the rest of us? Be the one who sees the person, not the chair. Be the one who brings the dog. Be the one who shatters the silence. Because they are in there, and they are waiting for us. The morning after Chester made Ethan speak in colors, my phone buzzed with a message that felt like a hand shoving him back into the darkness. "Report to the main office immediately. Do not bring the dog." No greeting, no curiosity, no "how did you manage that?" Just a directive. Chester sat by the front door the way he always did when I reached for my badge. Tail sweeping the tile, eyes bright, ready to go. I clipped the leash out of habit. "Not today, bud," I murmured. He pressed his head into my thigh, confused, as if he couldn't fathom why humans always wait until something beautiful happens to punish it. Dylan was in the living room, secured in his chair, watching the ceiling fan spin like it was whispering secrets he couldn't repeat. I kissed his forehead. "I'll be back," I told him, the way I told him every morning. But my gut didn't believe it. Because I'd witnessed what happens when a system decides a person isn't worth the inconvenience, and systems don't apologize. They just process you. The front office of Ridgewood Elementary smelled like laminated paper and dread. The receptionist offered me the kind of smile people wear when they're about to hand you something awful, but want to feel compassionate while doing it. "James, they're waiting for you." The principal, Mr. Crawford, didn't ask me to sit. He pointed at a chair the way someone points at a spot where a delivery should be placed. On his desk lay a folder, thick, my last name typed across the tab. Across from him sat Mrs. Thornton, wrapped in her cardigan and her crossed arms like she was guarding a property line. Beside her sat a woman I'd never met. Neat hair, clenched jaw. A clipboard stamped with a district seal I'd never trusted. "Mr. Harlow," Mr. Crawford said, lacing his fingers together. "This is Dr. Marsh. She's with Student Services." Student Services. A phrase that sounds like help until you learn it means compliance. "Why was I called in?" I asked. Mrs. Thornton exhaled as though the question itself exhausted her. "Because you turned my classroom into a sideshow." I held her gaze. "A child used a communication device," I said. "His classmates included him." He smiled. Dr. Marsh's expression didn't shift. "We've received a number of concerns." "From whom?" "Parents. Mr. Crawford said quickly. One child has allergies. Another is frightened of dogs. Several parents reported their kids came home distracted and upset. Upset that a disabled kid exists? The words came out sharper than I'd planned. Mr. Crawford's eyes dropped, like he didn't want that sentence anywhere near a record. Nobody framed it that way, Dr. Marsh replied, flat as a ledger. But we have an obligation to maintain an appropriate learning environment for all students. I laughed once, not because it was funny, because it was familiar. All students, I repeated, except Ethan. Mrs. Thornton leaned in. Ethan is medically fragile. The dog is a hygiene issue. The tablet isn't approved. And you undermined my classroom management in front of the entire class. Undermined. That's the word people use when you refuse to participate in cruelty. He's not a hazard, I said. He's a kid. And the tablet, not district issued, Dr. Marsh interrupted, which introduces liability. If the device is damaged, if a student is hurt, if it's recording, it doesn't record. You say that, she replied. We can't operate on feelings, Mr. Harlow. There it was. Feelings. The label a system slaps on empathy when it needs to dismiss it. Mr. Crawford slid a sheet of paper across the desk. Until we complete our review, he said, you'll be reassigned to non-student duties. I looked down. Temporary reassignment. No classroom, no Ethan, no Chester. Just hallway patrol and copy room shifts, where good intentions go to suffocate in silence. You're pulling me away from him, I said quietly. We're removing you from the disruption, Mrs. Thornton corrected, barely hiding her satisfaction. I pushed the paper back. No, I said. You're ripping him away from the first day anyone treated him like a human being. Mr. Crawford's cheeks reddened. This isn't personal. It's always personal, I said. It just doesn't feel that way when the person suffering is always the same kind of person. Dr. Marsh's pen hovered. Are you suggesting discrimination? I didn't hand her a legal term. I gave her a human one. I'm suggesting cowardice, I said, because managing a corner is easier than confronting a conscience. Mrs. Thornton's jaw clenched. You have no idea what it's like to have 20 students depending on you. I stood. You're right, I said. I don't. Then my voice dropped. I know what it's like to have one child the world keeps trying to erase. That finally made Mr. Crawford look up. What do you mean? I swallowed. My son, I said. Dylan, he's like Ethan. The temperature in the room shifted. Not warmer, just more cautious. Like they'd suddenly understood that the aide standing before them was also a father with nothing left to lose. They let me leave with my badge still pinned to my chest, but it hung heavier now, like a weight whispering, do what we say or we'll punish you for caring. I bypassed the copy room entirely. I walked straight to Ethan's classroom and pushed the door open without knocking. Mrs. Thornton stiffened when she saw me, like I was a contagion. Ethan was exactly where he'd always been. Back corner, facing the wall. No tablet. No circle of classmates. No Chester. Just beige paint and silence. As if yesterday had been a dream that someone had already stamped inappropriate. Heat flooded my chest. I crossed the room and knelt beside him. Hey, Ethan, I whispered. I'm here. His eyes shifted. A slow, painful effort. And I saw the difference. The difference between a child who had been seen and a child who had been shelved again. His breathing was faster. His jaw was clamped. His fingers, those same fingers that had found yellow without a second's doubt, were curled tight, his whole body bracing around a memory it refused to let go of. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small strip of soft cloth, a piece I'd cut from one of Chester's spare bandanas the night before, smuggling a scrap of hope before anyone could confiscate it. I placed it gently into Ethan's palm. His fingers quivered. Then, slowly, they closed around it. Not a spasm. A choice. Mrs. Thornton cleared her throat like a blade. "You're not assigned to this room," she said. "I'm assigned to being decent," I replied without looking up. She pointed at the door. "Out." I rose carefully, the way you leave a hospital room. Ethan made a sound. Low, strained, frustrated. It wasn't a word, but it landed in my body like one. "Don't go." I leaned close. "I'm not finished," I whispered. "I promise you, I'm not finished." The phone call came at 11:17 in the morning, a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, a woman's voice fractured before she even managed a hello. "Is this James?" she asked. "Yes. This is Sophia," she said. "Ethan's mother." I closed my eyes. Of course the system had my number now. Not to express gratitude, to contain me. "I heard about yesterday," she said. "My neighbor's daughter is in the class. She told me she said Ethan picked colors." Heard. Not the school informed me. Not his teacher reached out. A 10-year-old had delivered the news the adults chose to withhold. My throat knotted. "Yes," I said, "he did." She inhaled sharply, like her lungs had been holding their breath for years. "They keep insisting he can't," she said. "They keep telling me I'm imagining him, that he's—" She didn't finish the word, but I'd heard it dressed in different voices. Furniture. Vegetable. Burden. I kept my voice steady. "Come in," I said. "Today, if you can. Request a meeting." A pause. "A meeting?" she whispered. "They never listen to me." "I know," I said. Then I added, gently, "They listen when there are witnesses." I hated that it was true, but pretending otherwise wouldn't rescue her son. By 1:30, we were in a conference room with a long table that looked like it had hosted 1,000 conversations where nothing changed. Mr. Crawford sat at the head. Dr. Marsh sat beside him, poised to document whatever protected the district best. Mrs. Thornton arrived last, carrying her indignation like a handbag. And Sophia walked in, clutching a folder so thick it could have propped open a door. She looked exhausted in a way I recognized immediately. Not tired. Erased. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, as if she didn't trust herself to have a single strand out of place. Her hands trembled when she set the folder on the table. "I want to know," she said, voice shaking but sharp, "why my son has been parked in the corner for 3 years." Silence. Mr. Crawford cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reyes." "Ms. Reyes," she corrected. Mrs. Thornton rolled her eyes. So slightly, she probably thought nobody caught it. But I caught it. And Sophia caught it. And Ethan had been catching it for years. Dr. Marsh spoke in her measured professional voice. "Ethan's placement reflects what the team determined was appropriate given his needs. My son needs communication," Sophia said, her voice climbing. "He needs inclusion. He needs someone to talk to him like he exists." Mrs. Thornton sighed. "He can't access grade-level curriculum." Sophia's head snapped toward her. "I didn't ask for grade level," she said. "I asked for dignity." That sentence made something inside me straighten. Because it wasn't a plea. It was a verdict. Mr. Crawford leaned forward. Yesterday's situation generated a lot of emotions. Sophia laughed once, bitter and raw. Yes, heaven forbid anyone feels something inside a building full of children. Dr. Marsh tapped her pen. We can't dismiss parent concerns about dogs, allergies, classroom disruption. My son is not a disruption, Sophia said, and now her voice vibrated with fury. He's not background noise. He's not a problem to manage. He's a child. Mrs. Thornton's expression hardened. We have 20 other children. There it was. The sentence that always kills empathy. We have others. As if one child's humanity is a luxury item. I leaned forward. May I show you something? I asked. Dr. Marsh's eyes narrowed. What? I placed my tablet on the table. Not district issued. Not sanctioned. But real. I brought this yesterday, I said. Ethan used it. Twice. Accurately. With an entire class watching. Mrs. Thornton scoffed. Coincidence. Sophia's eyes ignited. Then prove it, she said. Right now. Mr. Crawford hesitated. Dr. Marsh looked like she wanted to say no. Because no is what systems default to when a truth might cost them something. But Sophia brought something they hadn't prepared for. A mother who had absolutely nothing left to lose. You want to keep telling me he's not in there, she demanded. Then look me in the face and tell me you refuse to even try. Mr. Crawford exhaled, defeated. Bring Ethan in, he said quietly. Mrs. Thornton's lips compressed into a bloodless line. A minute later, they rolled Ethan into the room. He arrived strapped and tilting, his eyes wide like he understood exactly what this room meant. Not learning. Judgment. Sophia rushed to him, pressed her lips to his forehead, and then, as though she was terrified to hope too loudly, she looked at me. I angled the tablet toward Ethan. 4 colors. Big, simple. I kept my voice gentle. Ethan, I said. It's James. Remember yesterday? His breathing shifted. Tiny but unmistakable. Can you show us yellow? His arm shook violently. It wasn't graceful. It was combat. Sophia pressed her hand over her mouth, tears already building. Mrs. Thornton looked away, as if watching were an inconvenience. Ethan's hand scraped across the tray. His knuckles crashed down. Yellow. The robotic voice spoke, and Sophia broke, a sound torn between sobbing and laughing, like someone surfacing for air after years of holding her breath underwater. Dr. Marsh blinked. Once. Twice. Like her brain was scrambling to file this under something safe. That could be, she started. Again, Sophia demanded, voice razor-sharp through tears. Do it again! I didn't want to push him, but Ethan's eyes were blazing now. Not blank. Not absent. Blazing. I swallowed and changed the prompt. Ethan, I said, show us red. He fought. He shook. He slammed. Red. The room went dead silent. Mr. Crawford stared at the tablet as though it had just made a confession. Mrs. Thornton's face had drained of color. And Dr. Marsh finally wrote something down that wasn't a liability note. It looked like fear, because fear is what systems feel when they realize they've been wrong on the record. Sophia stepped closer to the table, voice quaking but lethally calm. So, she said, how long have you been keeping my son in a corner while he was capable of this? Nobody answered. Because there is no answer that doesn't sound exactly like what it is. Neglect.
The backlash didn't wait for the meeting to finish.
It arrived the way it always does, fast, loud, and aimed at the easiest target. By dismissal, parents were clustered near the pickup line, whispering and staring like I'd dragged a scandal into their neat routine. A man in a ball cap approached me beside my car. "You're the dog guy," he said. "I'm James," I replied. He didn't offer his name. "My daughter told me your dog was in the room yesterday," he said. "She came home going on about wheelchairs and drool and stuff." His tone wasn't vicious. It was defensive, like he was trying to shield his kid from reality. "She's 10, I said. "Reality's heading her way whether we introduce it gently or not." He frowned. "I'm not trying to be a bad person, but we've got assessments coming. My kid's already falling behind. I don't pay taxes, so class time can turn into..." He stopped himself, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air. "Charity." I held his gaze. "What would you want," I asked softly, "if your daughter was the one strapped to that chair?" His jaw flexed. "That's not fair," he snapped. "Don't guilt trip me." I nodded. "You're right. It's not fair." Then I said the part that makes people furious because it's honest. "But fairness doesn't mean you never have to look at someone else's pain." He scoffed and walked off. Behind him, a woman approached, arms loaded with grocery bags, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "My son is in that class," she said quietly. "He told me Ethan smiled yesterday, said it was the first time he ever really noticed him." She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered, as though saying it any louder would get her in trouble. And that, right there, was the entire country compressed into a single parking lot. One parent terrified their child will lose an edge. Another parent watching their child become someone worth admiring. Both frightened. Both convinced they're right. That night, after I fed Dylan and guided him through his routine, I sat at the kitchen table with Chester's head in my lap and stared at the wall. Not like Ethan. Like someone trying not to shatter. Because here's the truth, nobody wants to speak aloud. Inclusion sounds beautiful until it costs something. Until it costs time. Until it costs comfort. Until it costs the illusion that your child's success is the only metric that matters. And the people who get sacrificed first are always the ones who can't fight back. Kids like Ethan. Kids like Dylan. I opened my laptop. Not to expose anyone, not to name a school, not to launch a witch hunt. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a mirror. So I wrote a post. No district name, no teacher name. Just a story. About a boy in a wheelchair labeled furniture. About a dog who refused to accept that label. About a classroom that changed for a single day until adults tried to undo it because it was inconvenient. I ended with one question. If your child had been the one in the corner, would you still call it a distraction? Or would you call it a life? I stared at the screen for a long time. Chester sighed. Dylan made a quiet sound from his chair. Soft, unknowing, but present. And I hit post. By morning, my phone was an inferno. Messages from strangers, parents, teachers, therapists. People calling me inspiring. People calling me reckless. People battling in comment threads I hadn't even opened yet. One message read, "Finally, someone says it. Schools treat disabled kids like cargo." Another, "Stop scapegoating teachers. You have no clue what they face." Another, "If my kid's education suffers because of one child, that's not acceptable." And then, inevitably, someone wrote, "This is why the country is falling apart." Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a side.
And Ethan? Ethan was still in the corner unless someone fought for him.
That's the part that turned my stomach. We love to debate human beings like their policy positions. We love to turn suffering into a comment section sport. But when the phones go dark, the corner is still there. I walked into Ridgewood and felt the air change. Teachers whispered. Staff dodged my eyes. Mr. Crawford intercepted me before I even reached the hallway. His face looked 10 years older than the day before. "You published something," he said. "I wrote a story," I replied. "No names, no school." He rubbed his forehead. "It's everywhere." Dr. Marsh stood by the window like she wished she could escape through it. Mrs. Thornton wasn't present, but her fingerprints were all over the room. Mr. Crawford exhaled. "This puts us in a very uncomfortable position." "I didn't create that position," I said. "You've been standing in it. I just switched on the light." Dr. Marsh's voice tightened. "You're fanning the flames." I looked at her. "No," I said quietly. "I'm making them visible." Mr. Crawford's tone softened. "James, people are furious." "Good," I said. They stared at me like I'd unraveled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smirk. I just stated the truth. Because anger is what happens when comfort gets interrupted by humanity. Then Mr. Crawford asked, almost begging, "What do you want?" I thought of Ethan's fingers closing around Chester's bandana. I thought of Sophia's tears. I thought of Dylan watching a ceiling fan like it was the only conversation anyone would allow him. And I said it plainly. "I want Ethan out of the corner," I said. "I want him given tools to communicate. I want him included as if he belongs. And I want the adults in this building to stop talking about him like he's already gone." Dr. Marsh scoffed. "And the other students?" I held her gaze. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked softly. "As if Ethan isn't one of them." Mr. Crawford swallowed. Then, very quietly, he said, "We'll schedule an IEP meeting." Sophia had been begging for that for years. Now it was happening because the internet was paying attention. That fact should have felt like victory. Instead, it made me nauseous. Because why does a child need an audience to deserve dignity? At lunch, I passed Mrs. Thornton in the hallway. She stopped, eyes glacial. "You think you're some kind of hero," she said. I didn't flinch. "I think I'm a dad," I replied. "And I think you got comfortable with a corner." Her nostrils flared. "You just made everything harder." "For whom?" I asked. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Because she already knew. Harder for the adults. Not for Ethan. The corner was already hard. Harder than any test. Harder than any policy. Harder than any uncomfortable conversation. I walked past her. And in my head, I heard the question now living in every comment thread. Is inclusion worth the cost? Here's the part nobody wants to admit. If your answer is only when it's easy, then you're not describing inclusion. You're describing convenience with better branding. That afternoon, I returned to Ethan's classroom. Not as his assigned aide, not as a rule follower, as a witness. Mrs. Thornton tried to keep him in the corner again. But something had shifted. The kids had shifted. A boy from the Lego table raised his hand. "Mrs. Thornton," he said, voice small but steady, "why does Ethan have to face the wall?" The room froze. That question, simple, innocent, was more dangerous than any adult accusation. Because children don't ask it to win an argument. They ask it because it's wrong. Mrs. Thornton's lips parted,
but no excuse sounded defensible out loud. Another kid spoke up. "Yesterday he picked colors," the girl with braids said. "That means he's listening." And then, like dominoes, more voices. "He's in our class." "He likes Chester." He smiled. I stood motionless, heart hammering, because this is what a revolution actually looks like. Not a viral post. Not a dramatic monologue. A child asking a question an adult can't answer without sounding cruel. Mrs. Thornton's eyes cut to me, furious. But she couldn't punish an entire class for recognizing a human being. Not anymore. Not with people watching. Not with the truth wide awake. Slowly, rigidly, she waved her hand. "Fine," she said. "Move him to the side." It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't the corner. And Ethan's eyes, those eyes everyone kept insisting were empty, locked onto the voices around him like a person thawing after years in the cold. That night, my post crossed 1 million views. I didn't celebrate because Ethan wasn't a video. He wasn't content. He wasn't a debate topic. He was a kid who had waited 10 years for a single person to say, "You belong here." And now the whole country was arguing about whether belonging should be earned. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked in that post, because this is where the story stops being mine and becomes yours. If your child's test score dropped 1 point, but a child like Ethan got to be seen as human for the first time, would you call that a tragedy? Or would you call it a price worth paying? Because somewhere in a beige corner, a kid is still staring at a wall. And whether he stays there depends on what kind of person we choose to be when empathy costs us something.